Now we're good. All right. Well, good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. This particular session is the business of medical cannabis, and Charles Felix, who is the president of Cannabis News Florida, is going to moderate this session. I encourage you, if you haven't picked up his newsletter, magazine, publication, I guess is what it's called, I would encourage you to do it because he keeps track of what's going on in this industry, and we'll give everybody an update on, is it weekly or?
It's monthly, but we have a weekly newsletter. So
Okay.
you can sign up for this for a weekly newsletter.
Yeah. So with that, Charles, I'm going to let you run the show, sir.
Okay, great. Good morning, and I can think of other things to do on a Sunday morning, but I'm glad you're here, especially in Orlando. So we do not have the mouse coming in to do anything for us today, but we do have 4 individuals that will be wearing ears when they make their presentation, so you can feel like you're in Orlando. So anyway, with that, I want to welcome you. I'm glad you're able to make it to Orlando, stay out of South Florida if you're from South Florida, because the flooding was terrible. So we got 4 speakers, 4 interesting topics about the business of cannabis. If you are starting a business or in the business of medical cannabis, you will be picking up nuggets of information from these individuals that you're going to be able to take back to your practice management, and basically run your practice more efficiently and probably more in compliance too. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, David Wilkinson. He's the founder and president of Investment Training Institute, LLC. He also deals with some investment and helping you if you're looking for money, to be able to find money. So David has brought his checkbook with him. So after his talk, if you feel like you need any money, David will be sitting right over there, and he'll be writing a check up to $1 million for those people who need any money. So it's not an issue. Not an issue. So David, with that, I want to welcome you to the podium.
Wow, what an introduction. Well, good morning. Why are you here? It's because you have a story. You didn't wander in off the street. My story happened in Fort Collins, Colorado. And here's what took place. I was sitting across from a friend. He said, David, I just got hired to be a director of marketing and sales at a hemp and CBD company. And I said, I've never heard of those 2 terms. And he said, David, Colorado is at the epicenter of cannabis. How do you not know what hemp and CBD are? And I said, I have no idea. So he shared with me for the next 2 hours about the planet, about the people, about the plant, and about how it's changing the world. And I said to him, Brad, I'm all in. And that was 4 years and 3 months ago, because as you know, every day in this industry is like a week of knowledge that you have to learn. So that's how we started the Hemp Business Advisors. A year later, I was on the phone from a referral, and it was a $24 billion hedge fund. And that manager and I became very good friends. He said, David, I have unlimited funds to put into the cannabis space. I just can't find companies that have good packages that I can fund. He said, if you help them with their business plans and their pitch decks, I'll fund them all day long. So in 2019, we had $191 million of deals that went through in the hemp, CBD, and cannabis space, and it continues to grow from there. So that's my story. My story is I felt called into the industry because of the plant. I have people that I've met that were on 13 to 15 opioids that are off of all of them now because of the plant. I have people that have revolutionized their lives because they left their past business and their past experience and went into an agriculturally based business and have been changed forever. So no matter what your story is, if you're in the industry, at one time or another, you're probably going to say this: my vision and my dream is bigger than my budget. And if that has ever happened to you, that's why I'm here. You know, I really hadn't looked at any pitch decks until I got into the hemp and CBD industry. I really hadn't gone into funding, so this industry pulled me into investment, and I've never looked back on that. It's been a challenge, but I want to share with you today about how to actually gain funding for your cannabis-based business. If you're not in cannabis, that's fine. It's the same criteria. All right, let's look at some of the ideas. So there's 3 different phases of business growth that I want to share with you this morning. The first one is the startup phase of every single company that you start up. All right, how many of you are starting a company right now? Let me see your hands. Raise them high, please. Entrepreneurial. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to spend more time on this first phase. Okay, so the entrepreneurial phase is you're making less than $2 million. It means typically that you feel the crunch every day, that your expenses are higher than what you're generating in revenue. I know people that have remortgaged their house, sold a car, asked their kids for a loan. I mean, people, when you really are excited about what you're doing, you find the capital. They usually have less than 5 employees. They're trying to ramp up the company, and they don't want to hire too quickly. And so I don't know about you, but the people that I talk to in the cannabis space is a high turnover rate. So the reason why it's so high is because there's a lot of people that say they can do a lot of things, and because most people believe them, they don't vet them properly. They don't actually call and follow up on their references. And so what happens is a person comes and says, hey, I'm a sales manager, and they get, oh, great, we'll hire you for 6 figures, which I can have a long list of people that have done that, and then come to find out the person has never made a sale in their life. They're just excited to be in the industry, and that's why there's such high turnover. So the duality of focus is the challenge. The number one reason why somebody starts a business is they're typically passionate about the vision of their company, right? They're passionate about the product or service that they're wanting to sell. They're not thinking, the reason I got into this business was to really focus on running a company. And that's what it takes to make a successful business. Not just great at what you're doing, but great at running a company. And that means that sometimes the learning curve is so high, especially in the cannabis industry. When we first got in, I didn't realize that I needed to learn about genetics. And I didn't know I had to learn about the 10 different types of extraction companies. And then I needed to learn about why there were no SOPs and signed contracts. Why is it always handshakes and people get screwed? And then I had to learn about, what did it mean to go into products? And what about industrial hemp? Because that's all about fiber. And then why aren't the banks banking all this cash? This makes no sense to me. Why is all this legacy? I had to learn so many different things, the duality of focus when we started. I was like, how are we going to grow a company when I don't even know the questions to ask about 50 different areas? This is one of the most complex industries that I have ever seen in 22 years of coaching and 250 companies. You have to know everything in order to really be effective in what you're doing. And the last one is, typically people that are in a startup are in a place where they're needing coaching. They ask the question, in fact, I met an amazing gentleman just yesterday. He said he's got 3 amazing secrets to bring into this industry. And I said to him, I won't say his name is Fred. Fred, don't share this information. It's going to get stolen so quick. Let's come up with a great marketing plan that has all the sizzle and you keep the steak, and let's make sure that you capitalize on helping the industry. So sometimes it's about coaching. Number 2 is after you get out of this entrepreneurial phase, which hopefully won't take too long, you get into the maturity phase. It means you have more cash flow than what you have expenses. You're starting to think about where am I going with this company? Now, there's a certain type of person that gets into the industry that comes in with the exit strategy in mind. I remember, I can't tell you how many tech people have gotten in this industry. I typically don't work with tech people. The reason why is I'll ask them, so why did you get into the cannabis space? And they said, I'm getting into exit. And that we don't really help people like that. That's not the purpose of why we're here. We're here to get people in which they die with the company that they started. Now, not everybody's called to do that, but if you're getting in just to make money and get out, there's a good chance you'll probably lose a lot of money and maybe a lot of friends. It's a very difficult industry to get in. So we say to people, what is your long-term strategy? Well, if you're making $2 to $5 million, you're growing your team. You're starting to keep people in your company, and you're starting to build loyalty to those people. That means you're thinking differently. It means you're going to start focusing on creation of systems. I remember we got hired to provide executive coaching in a water extraction business, and the CEO, the founder, she said to me, David, I need you to help my sales manager. He's not selling. And I said, well, how long have you had him here on board? And she said, no, 18 months. I said, 18, how much sales? No, he hasn't sold anything yet. And I said, how much are you paying him? Oh, 6 figures. I said, let me get this straight. You hired a sales manager for over 6 figures. You kept him longer than a year, and he's never made a sale. Is that correct? Yes. Oh, yeah, but he's a nice guy. Okay, that's wonderful. So I said, can I help? So I sat down with the gentleman. I coached him for 90 days. And the first question I asked was, so show me your marketing and sales package. Show me the strategy that you have. And he kind of looked at me blankly, which caused a little bit of fear in me. And I said, okay, why don't you show me your scripts? Where are your phone scripts? Where's your email scripts? And he said, I don't have any scripts. I said, where's your social media strategy? You know how many times you're posting? I think we have a Facebook page of like 49, he said. And by the time I was done asking general business questions, there were zeros to every single one. And that means that even though the company was almost 2 years old, they hadn't gotten to the place of the maturity phase where they were actually focusing on the systems of their company. Because it's really important. If you're looking for funding and you don't have your systems in place, good chance you're not going to get funding. Because they're like, this isn't a strong enough company that we can rely upon the systems that they have in place to manage their business and grow a strong foundation. So some of you are saying, well, what happened at the end, David? I said, oh, that's easy. So at the end of the 90 days, we had a whole marketing and sales package for him. And I sat down with the CEO and I said to her, here is the package. I said, if he does not make numerous sales that are large in the next 30 days, I would let him go. 30 days later, he hadn't done a single thing with anything that we did, and she let him go. That's called systems. If you don't have systems and somebody's not producing, do you know how difficult it is emotionally to let them go? Because you're losing what it feels like family or a friend. That's one of the parts that I love about the cannabis industry, is you might not know a single person in this room, and when you talk to them, you're all in the same place because it's about the plant. It's about how we're helping people, what we're doing to change the world together. And it's hard to let somebody that you consider a friend go. But if you have a system, the system weeds out the people that are unproductive so that it's not emotional for you. That was for somebody in this room today. This is the place where you are in a funding place. You're looking for capital because you say, we have enough going on now. Maybe I want a franchise. Maybe I want a branch. Maybe I want to buy another company and acquire another company. You're looking for funding. So that's one of the purposes of why I'm in the space, is specifically to help companies get funding. So it's really easy to get funded in the cannabis space. It's really, really simple. It's really easy, right? How many of you gotten funding in this space so far? Raise your hands. Look around. Look at all the hands that are raised.
Because it's so easy.
401ks don't count. So, do you know why it's so difficult to get funded in this space? Do you know why it's so difficult? Because the majority of the people that have come into the space are not coming with MBAs that know how to put financial packages together for investments. This is an agriculturally based, doesn't matter how you look at it, business. So if you want to get funded, you have to know the 7 criteria that all investment companies are looking for from you. And if you check off those boxes, you'll get funded all day long. Number 3 is the expansion phase. This is when you're making over $5 million in revenue and you're saying, where am I going to go from here on? It means you have enough momentum. You probably have a team over 11 employees. And now you're asking this question, what is my legacy going to be in the industry? When I'm dead and gone, how is what I'm doing today going to make an impact on the next generation? That's a different question, isn't it? You know, if you're a medical doctor, you never started your practice with the belief of going through all of this medical school. I can't wait to run a medical practice and develop SOPs. Right? No doctor said that. No doctor said this. I can't wait to have staff problems and challenges. You know, like that. Why do they got excited about medicine and about patients, not about running a business? And therefore, this is about how do you pass on your legacy of your life. And if you don't think about that after this many years, your expansion phase is to ask you the question, when you're dead and gone, what then? Are you going to leave this to your family? Are you going to open a trust, right? Are you going to, well, let's talk about some of the ideas here. But the last one is, this is really about consulting. This is about how do you think from somebody else's perspective, how you can do this that actually makes the most sense and makes the largest impact. So let's take a look at the 7 different criteria, the different areas that investors are looking for, regardless of what phase you're in, okay? So here's number 1, is you need to have experience of what you're planning on doing. Now, I look at between 10 and 30 pitch decks from companies looking for funding every single week. My favorite is from IT groups of people that have got together to come into the industry. They have the best pitch decks that are out there. They will literally spend $40,000 to $60,000 to create their pitch deck. It is a work of art. There's a little tear in my eye when I scroll the page of the amazing professionalism. And here's what I found, is I scroll all the way down, and they say they have their business plan done, they have their performance done. The package is so strong, and every single one of them came from IBM or Dell Computer or all these corporates, and none of them have ever touched a cannabis plant. None of them have ever planted one. They don't even got one grow in their backyard, but they say we have the whole package together. Well, let me ask you, Fred, how many plants have you planted? Oh, no. When we get the funding, then we're going to hire all those people. All those people. And I'm like, I wish you the best of luck, but we're not the people for you. Your experience with the plant gives you the authority in the industry to make the money from those sitting around you. If you don't have your story, and the investor says, tell me, why are you in the cannabis space? And you don't have a compelling story, you will not get funded. Because they're looking for people who have experience and history that they want to use that experience to make an impact through their company. If you think the cannabis space is all about money, then you haven't been around it very long. Number 2, and please put a star next to this one, this is the most important of all documents. In fact, we craft these from scratch for people that are looking for funding. This is called a pitch deck. Now, when I first started getting into funding, it was about 3 years ago, and I would call up somebody that was looking for funding. 5 out of every 10 companies looking for funding didn't know what those 2 words meant. It was really kind of funny. So I'd say, hi, Bob, how you doing? Tell me about your Cannabis Inc. Oh, yeah, oh, no, we're doing great. We're killing it. We're doing great. Are you looking for funding? I'm looking for funding. I'm so excited. We're ready to get funded. We've got all these, we're ready to go. I said, great. Shoot me your pitch deck. What's that? Oh, for the love of it. So if you don't know what a pitch deck is and you're looking for funding, you're probably not going to get funded. This is the number 1 way to get the open door for a phone call for funding. Let me say it again. Your pitch deck is the door opener to the investors to call you. So if you send your pitch deck out to 5 different investment firms and you don't get a call back, it's because it's not good enough. Now, what are the elements inside your pitch deck that you need to answer for the investors? That's a great question. This is a sharp group at 8:30 on a Sunday morning. If you'd like to know those secrets, you can talk to me later. Okay, so if you want to know how to develop a pitch deck, that's at the National Cannabis Industry Association. I wrote an article that they published, which is crafting a pitch deck that gains funding. Because so many times people craft and spend a lot of money. It takes a lot of money to create a pitch deck from scratch. But here's what they do. They present their company, okay, from the pitch deck perspective without ever thinking about what does the investors look for in the pitch deck. Those are the secrets. The pitch deck is not to represent your company. The pitch deck is to get you funded. And those are 2 different purposes. It's either really quiet because I'm speaking really well this morning or that you haven't had your 3rd cup of coffee. Are you tracking with me? Okay, I just want to make sure because it got really quiet and I got really concerned. Okay, number 3, your business plan. Everyone got into the cannabis industry because they wanted to spend 40 to 80 hours developing their business plan. Everybody I talk to, that's what they say. David, I love the cannabis industry. It forced me to sit down and spend 2 weeks of my life developing a business plan. Anybody? Anyone? No, nobody did that. Nobody gets into cannabis because they're excited to develop a business plan. But this is the proof of concept. Yeah, but David, we're making all this money. That's great. Show me your business plan. What does a business plan do? It means that you have the capacity to sit down and to develop a plan that an investor can follow. I'm not talking about the 196-page business plan that I got from a tech group that I didn't even open. Why would I open 196? I don't have time to read a book. Okay, I'm not talking about a pitch deck that's 50 pages long. Your pitch deck should be 10 to 20 slides. Your business plan should be 10 to 20 pages. That's all an investor is going to look at. And they're going to just read the first few paragraphs to see if you can actually communicate clearly about your company. They'll look and see, did you do your performance? Did you do your market research? So if you want to do a book because you have an MBA and you want to prepare a book for investors, you won't get invested. They don't have time to read your book. I know it's important, but make a short one. That way it's fundable. All right, number 4 is your documentation. Your documentation is extremely important. When someone says, I want to see your performance, and you say, what's that? That's not a good sign. They want to see the documents because they want to ask the question, is this company feasible? Now, if you're a pre-revenue company, that's not somebody that we fund. Those are called angel investors. And angel investors are very important. They're called family and friends, right? Even enemies, if you want to borrow money from them. It's people that can help you get off the ground. And we don't actually work with angel investors. If you do, I'm happy for you. We're only looking for companies that are generating $2 million in revenue and higher. They're looking for debt or equity or tokenization. That's who we focus on. But at this place, your documents prove to the investors that these are feasible ideas. For instance, I was on the phone with our $24 billion hedge fund manager. And so he and I were talking, and we had a great couple from Florida, and they wanted to buy about 400 acres. And they had a great pitch deck, a great business plan. And we got them on the phone. We're having a conference call. And the hedge fund manager asked them this question. He says, I really don't understand on your performance about your ramp up of your finances. And I said, okay, well, what's the question? He says, how do you go from 0 to 50 million in the 24 months? I don't really understand that. Well, unfortunately, they were $49 off per CBD point per pound, which it has now. It wasn't 3 years ago. It was per point, and now it's per pound, which means that they actually were going to generate $1 million in 24 months, not $50 million. And the hedge fund manager says, well, it was a pleasure speaking with you both, and I wish you all the best. Click, gone. Your documents can cause you to lose an investment opportunity because the investor will look at your numbers and ask the question, do they know what they're talking about? Is this feasible? So make sure you know your numbers. Now, number 5 is about your team. How many times have you met somebody in the industry and they say this, I've got the next Google idea in the cannabis space? Anyone? Man, I hear that all the time. I'm the next Apple. I've got this great idea. And the first question I ask is, how big is the idea? Oh, David, it's a big idea. Great. I want to know who your team is. So who's your CEO? Who's your CFO? Well, who's going to be your general manager? Well, you got a sales director? Well, I'm not quite there. Okay, I want to know who your team is. If you're looking for, $500,000, if you're looking for $50 million, you're looking for $500 million, your team is the people that proves to the investors that you're not a one-woman band. So your team is extremely important. When I see a pitch deck and I see that there's 5 to 10 people and they all are experts in their area of expertise in the industry, I know that I can give that pitch deck to an investor because their investment is safe, because the team is backing up what the money that they're going to get. They're going to do what they are really called to do. This next one is after your pitch deck. This is the number 2 reason why people don't get funded, and this is called communication. Here's the fun part. Have you ever met somebody that needed funding yesterday? Anyone talk to those people? They say, "Oh my gosh, I need funding. We gotta have funding. We gotta have it quick." Okay, if you don't know the funding process, you typically don't get funded for $2 million in a day. It takes just a hair longer than that. So if you have urgency, here's the challenge: is in this space there's something called ghosting. Do you know what ghosting is? Have you ever been ghosted by anyone in the cannabis space? Anyone? Or I'm the only one. Okay, well, I've been ghosted a lot. And here's what it looks like. A person says, I'm ready to get funded. I'm like, all right, great. Let's get a call up with the investors. Shoot me your pitch deck. And all of a sudden, I don't hear from them for 3 months. Hey, Bob, how's it going? It's been 3 months. I'm still waiting for your pitch deck. Oh, my gosh, I forgot about you. Oh, yeah, I'll send it over today. 2 weeks later, I get an email from the guy, and he sends me the pitch deck. By that time, I've forgotten him because I've talked to another 50 different companies in 2 weeks. I can't remember the guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, where did I meet this person? Urgency is the second reason why people don't get funded. When an investor says to you, I would like your pitch deck, if you do not immediately stop what you're doing and get the pitch deck to him, he believes you don't need funding and you don't want funding. Urgency is the second reason. Number 2 reason why people don't get funded is they don't take the urgency level on behalf of the investors seriously. And investors are all in this space, and they all have a lot of money, and they're looking for the next great opportunity that they can fund. And if you don't have the urgency that they do, they won't fund you. So if you want to get into the funding funnel, my encouragement is whenever they ask you for anything, they text you, they email you, they call you, immediately stop what you're doing and fulfill the request, because it proves to them, oh, they might be actually serious about getting funding. And lastly is ownership, which is about the integrity of the business. Have you ever met somebody in cannabis and they said, hey, this is my vision, and as soon as they said it, you said to yourself, no, it's not. This is somebody else's vision that you're trying to push. That's kind of intuitive, isn't it? Hopefully what you're doing today is because you love and know about the business that you're in. All right, the exit strategy. Number 1, stay small, elite, unique, build a brand, sell a percentage of your shares to another employee or employees who works with you. That's legacy. Number 2, you can grow your business to merge or acquire another company in order to maximize profits. I've seen this happen many times where you'll have 2 different extraction companies. They'll merge together. They give 2 different types of opportunities. They cut their expenses in half. They have a whole team. It's awesome. Number 3, grow the business to be acquired for a larger sell price and retire. Those are 3 different options based upon the type of business that you have. So I don't know about you, but this has been the best year in 4 years in the cannabis space. We have made better partnerships. We've funded more opportunities. We've coached better companies than we've ever seen in our life in this space. So my encouragement to you is, if you're just starting out or you've been in it for many, many years, this is your year to make an impact. This is your year to leave a lasting legacy. We look forward to working with you in the future. My name is David Wilkinson. I'm the founder and president of the Investment Training Institute and the co-founder of the Hemp Business Advisors. I look forward to speaking with you, and I'll see you at the Alliance HCM booth on the right in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much.
We have about 4 minutes for some questions. Are any questions directly for David? As I said earlier, if there are no questions, he will be available to write checks in the corner. It's not a problem. We do have a question. How much money would you like? Not a problem. We'll be also giving out individual money. Not a problem. So it's a good thing. So, David, I appreciate it. It was a great presentation. And just to follow up with that, we have 3 more great speakers. And if you think about what we're talking about this morning as far as the business of medical cannabis, each of these represents a product. You got 4 products in this business that you need to have. Oh, you got a question? A little late. You got any money? Well, he's a banker. He has money.
We're a banker. I am a banker.
He's got money.
We got a little bit of money, yep. Question, how much in general is do you do that debt to equity? What percentage do you mostly provide equity to these businesses, or are you looking at mostly providing debt? I mean, just kind of your business, and when they come to you, generally, what's the mix?
Okay, so we've got quite a few cannabis businesses in the funnel right now. Well, after we do a transaction review on the business, when we supply that entire package to the investors on the back end, There's sometimes 3 to 5 different investors that are looking to invest in that company. We may have 2 that are pure equity, 1 that's pure debt, and 2 that are a blend thereof. So it really depends upon the type of business and what they want to do with the money, whether or not it's equity, debt, or a blend thereof.
Thank you. And we do have bankers in the room, so if you need money, those 2 gentlemen right there are bankers. They also will be writing checks before the end of the day. Sasha, you need some money?
Thank you, Dr. Shaw.
There you go, there you go. So again, make a plan. So anyway, as I was saying, there are 4 products, and we're going to talk about the next product, because what's interesting about this plant is you can't grow it like you grow tomatoes and sell them. That doesn't work in this business. You have to have them actually tested for real reasons and for state reasons to have it tested. So we have somebody here today, Harry, who is he's the president and CEO of AccuScience Labs. I pronounce his last name, but I probably butcher it, so I'm not even going to go there, but you can see it in the program. And it's very interesting. I was introduced to Harry at the Industrial Hemp Conference, and he has some interesting things to talk about. Are you going to talk about that too, Harry? Yeah. The interesting things to talk about as far as pesticides is kind of the mystery pesticides that you didn't know were there and actually are. So with that, let me introduce you to Harry, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Harry Behzadi, as Charles mentioned. And actually, pretty good crowd for Sunday morning. I was asking Jane yesterday, am I going to be speaking to an empty room? But we got a very good crowd. Anyway, my name is Harry Behzadi, as Charles said. I'm a veteran of the 30 years and plus, I'm going by with a plus, of the environmental industry. I opened up my own lab in Orlando about 25 years ago. I was a VP of operation for some of the biggest labs in the country. About 3 years ago, I decided that's enough. This is the next best thing. And I started investigating into the cannabis industry. So I opened up my own lab in Eustis, Florida. We are a third-party lab. What do we do? We are every product that is sent by the MMTC, we have to test it for the efficacy and the safety of the product. And the last 2 years, last 2 days, we talk a lot about the, how these cannabis products works on the medical part of it. But today we're going to talk about not about the efficacy, but safety of this product. One of the factors on these safeties are pesticides. You know, as a veteran of the environmental industry, I've done hundreds of thousands of the pesticide tests in the last 30 years. It worked in all different Department of Defense. We work in the cattle dips in all over the state of Florida. We worked in the Everglades. We did a lot of testing. And when I came to this business, and I was pretty sure pesticide, oh no, we've been doing this for 30 years, no issue. Man, I was wrong. And, so the story I'm about to tell you guys right now is how wrong I was. And the reason I'm standing in front of you guys and doing this story, because we screwed up. And very high and mighty, we know what we're doing. Once we got our certification with Office of Medical Marijuana, one of the MTCs sent us proficiency samples and to identify the pesticide and quantitate them. We identified them right, but the quantity of one of the pesticides was way off on the derivative sample. So, as a PhD, we are used to fail or rejection, basically. So I started thinking. And being a PhD is more, as a chemist, is more than about single bond or double bond. You start doing some critical thinking, what happened. It really bothered me, with all that experience. why did we fail that? So we started investigating, and here I want to talk to you guys about the result of this investigation. Let's talk about the cannabis chemical combination. These are extremely, we have a lot of use for them, but they are extremely complex. They have two parts. They have a psychoactive and non-psychoactive part. The psychoactive part, we all know is a THC. The non-psychoactive is a CBD. And in addition to the cannabinoid, these compounds, they contain, they have cellulose, they have starch, they have fats. So there is a lot of chemicals involved in addition to the cannabinoids. Now, where is the challenges coming? Basically, first of all, the matrix of these compounds are very complex. And really, it could lead to a very poor recovery, reproducibility of the chromatogram. And the other part is that we have a high concentration of THC. When we are talking about flowers with 28, 30% delta 9 total THC, we're talking about derivatives at 80, 70, 80% delta THC. So we have all these high chemicals. At the same time, we are trying to quantitate pesticide as at part per billion level, actually. So you have a very high concentration of this chemical, and you're trying to quantitate and identify some of these pesticides at very high, very low concentration. And what makes it more difficult is that legally, this chemical is still federally, they're illegal. When we started our laboratory, the highest concentration of the cannabinoids I could buy was 1,000 parts per million. Now, they're giving me samples, and as we're going to go through it, in high percentage. So, how am I going to find out what is the effect of this high concentration of this chemical do? So actually, I brought that question after the rejection. I brought that question to some of there's a lot of literature out there. A lot of the instrument manufacturers, they come up with their own application note. I start asking them, when you did this application note, how did you guys do that? Did you do it on the low concentration, or if you did it in the high concentration, how did you get your samples? Because the only way you could get a high concentration of these THC level samples is you have a license for medical marijuana in this state, so you could do R&D basically. There's no other way you could get it. Even if you are a DEA certified, which we are, you cannot have access to more than 1,000 ppm. So I couldn't get a straight answer, so I had to design my own my own experiment. But let's talk about regulation first. Pesticides actually has been monitored in agriculture industry for almost 70 years. That was even before EPA. The first act was in late 1950s called FIFRA, and that regulated the pesticide regulation. The Congress enacted that act, and has been doing that for the last 70 years. Once the EPA was established during the Nixon administration, that responsibility fall onto the EPA. EPA now regulates all the pesticide in agriculture. Well, because the cannabis is a federally illegal, EPA had washed its hand and said we want to have nothing to do with it. So we have no levels of background federally for this pesticide. And one thing about, we're talking about medical marijuana, is we're talking about patients. These are the sick people. Some of them, they are sick. And the last thing we want to do is introduce another chemical to their body that could be dangerous to them. So having that pesticide and passing the level of pesticide that is is regulated is very important. So therefore, since we don't have any federal guidance, the state started enacting their own, pesticide limits. And guess what? The level and the number of pesticide is being regulated in each state is different. In Florida, we regulate over 57 pesticides. In Massachusetts, we regulate only 8 or 9 pesticides. The level of pesticide from state to state is different. So there is really a wild inconsistency on the pesticide regulation. And one thing, obviously with medical marijuana, you can leave the border of Florida. You make a product here, it stays in Florida, is consumed in Florida. But that's not the case with the CBD product. The CBD product that you are, producing in Massachusetts could end up in the shelf in the pharmacy in Florida. So, but the Florida regulation is requiring 57 and plus pesticide, but it's not tested. And as a American consumer, we trust our government when it comes to the product. If we go to a pharmacy and we pick up some gummy bears with a CBD, and we trust it that we paying tax for it, we paying tax, so we trust this is safe. But in actuality, it is not actually. It's not even FDA or any of the federal agencies. They want to have nothing to do with these things till actually it becomes they're required. So, before we talk about the experimentation and what happened, I want to talk to you about how we analyze pesticide in the various products. The instrument that we use is called liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, or LCMSMS. The liquid chromatography is a great instrument for analyzing pesticides, especially since a lot of these pesticides are non-volatiles and they are very thermally fragile. So that makes a very good and unique instrument for separating these compounds. And for identification, we're using a mass spectrometer. Mass spectrometer for non-chemists, basically every chemical in nature, when they go into the mass spec, they break down. The fragmentation pattern of each chemical is unique. It's like a fingerprint. Each human being has a specific fingerprint. Each organic chemical, once they get into the mass spec, they have that characteristic. So that makes it a great tool for us to actually detect and quantitate each one of the pesticides. I don't want to get into more detail, but it is important to talk about the LCMSMS because that's where the nature of what we call is a suppression of the pesticide by high level concentration of THC is happening. What happens is that the sample, after it gets separated, each one of them, they come through the ion source, they get vaporized, and then they go into the Q1, which, that's the quad one, they call it, which separates the precursors ion from everything else. And then they go into the collision cells, they get bombarded with the electron, they're making ions. And then they go to the quad 3 that they get passed through like a filter, and then they are obviously, at the end, they are getting detected at the detector. Now, when you are here on this level, that they are being vaporized, that's where the source of the suppression and problem is happening. What happens here is that you have about, when you have a 90% or 80% THC, and you have let's say 50 ppb pesticide. So they are competing actually, that who can volatilize and get in through these things. Obviously something with 70 or 80% has a lot better chance of getting through than something at much lower level. So with that said, after our failure or rejection, I finally got my hand on some high concentration cannabinoids. We had at this time, we had flower with a 33% delta 9 THCA. We had a distillate with the 89% delta 9 THC. and we have a CBD isolate with a 99% CBD. So we designed this experiment, and what we did is that we ran each one of these samples separately. We made sure they have no pesticide, they had no pesticide. And then what we did is after we extract them, we post-spike them. We spike them with a list of all the pesticides that the state of Florida requires. So we analyzed them. And let's just start with the flower, 33% flower, 33% THCA flower. We, as I said, we extracted, we analyzed it, we find no pesticide, and then we spiked it at the mid-level concentration of our calibration. So it should have been detected, extremely well. Well, we see here, we had no recoveries. Folks, these are the samples. This is like a standard. We added the standard to the sample, and we are seeing no recovery. So I went back to my chemist and said, "Are you sure you added this thing?" My jaw dropped. And I said, "Yeah, I added." I said this to the supervisor, "Let her prepare it again, and you witnesses." To be honest with you, I didn't trust her. I couldn't believe my eyes that we are adding this pesticide, we are not getting recovery. One of the pesticides that is, notorious in Florida is bifenthrin. As you see, the bifenthrin, we added this pesticide, spike, and we didn't find nothing, zero recovery, nothing. So I would have, reported that sample screen. So what we did is we diluted the sample. Once we diluted the sample, this is the green line, 10 times. We start seeing, actually, as you see the recoveries, I start getting better. I said, let's go one step further. We spiked it at 100x. The recoveries got even better. And then we went on and we spiked it and 500x. And as you see, these recoveries are pretty good actually. They're over 100%. Some of them are close to 100%. So as you make each one of these dilution, when you make it 10 times dilution, your 33% THCA is not 3%, 3.3%. When you are spiking it at 100 times, it's 0.33%. And if we go back to this slide, as you see here, it's a lot different when you have 33% or 0.3% and at 500x, 0.33, I'm gonna wake Charles up, 0.33 divided by 5?
You're way above that.
So you're talking about less than 0.1%. So obviously the pesticides have a better chance of getting vaporized and get through the system and being identified. So the whole thing, it does.
Not working.
Okay. So as you see, this is the rest of the pesticide. Obviously, all the pesticides are not behaving the same way. Some of the pesticides are more volatiles. So as you see, some of these pesticides at the 1x, you had a lot better recovery. Then we went on and we did the distillate with the 89%. Wow, you have almost no recoveries basically. You see, it's a flat line at 1x. Again, the same trend you see as we do more dilution at 10x, the concentration, we start the recoveries are getting better. Then you go to 100x and after that to 500x, the recoveries are getting much better. The same thing, we see the same trend here, but really with the 89%, the recoveries at 1x is really bad. Next, we did the isolate with the CBD product at 99%. Obviously, the recovery, as you see, at 1x was good for some of them. It wasn't good, it was mediocre. But some pesticide, you still had an issue. We had no recoveries. But again, the same thing happens here. As you go and you make more dilutions, the recoveries are getting better. So, what are we gonna do now? What's the solution? As I mentioned, testing all different types of environmental testing, all different kind of water, soil, plant tissue, animal tissues. We have a whole toolbox of cleanup methods in our hands. None of these cleanup methods, they work with the fatty acids, they work with the fat, they work with the chlorophyll, but it doesn't work on the cannabinoids. So no matter what kind of the cleanup methods you have, that is not going to be effective with these cannabinoids, basically. They act the same way as the pesticides, so none of these cleanup method works. So the best thing is that in our laboratories, what we do is we immediately dilute the sample. Fortunately, the LCM SMS gives you a great sensitivity, so you can dilute the samples right off the bat. So in order for us to actually make sure there is no pesticide in any of these samples, right off the bat, every flower sample, we dilute them at 10x and 50x. With the derivative, we make 3 dilutions for every samples. We do it at 10, 50, and 100 or 200x. That is the only way that we could detect the suppression. Speaking with the instrument manufacturer, one of the things that has to be done is, like everything else, we need more R&D. We need more R&D on the instrument manufacturer. They need to get their hand at this high concentration. This is the reality. You are buying vape, your vape sample is 89%. They got to be tested for pesticide. And you are inhaling this thing. Something like a microbutanol. It's a pesticide, and it's on the apple. You could wash that thing down, you could wash the apple, and that thing is gonna, wash off. But once you have it in the cannabis plant and you extract it, now you have it in your vape, that could change to the hydrogen cyanide, and that could be very dangerous. So it is not behaving the same way these pesticides behave in your edible, fruits and vegetables than how you are using the cannabis. And one other thing I do have to, one other thing that if we do find a pesticide, then we go ahead and we spike it with the method of standard addition. We make sure that pesticide is real. Because the last thing you want to do is, when you dilute the sample at 500x, any small amount of the pesticide you find, you got to be multiplying it by 500. And the last thing you want to do is you want to reject the $1 million batch of the product, basically, based upon a mistake. So this is becoming something very important. That's why we have that dollar sign there. And one last thing I want to add is, this is not something that, okay, we don't see it, we don't report it. It's not something that you could sweep it under the rug, basically. And the reason I'm saying that is, when you extract this cannabis, and we've seen a lot more in the last 2 days, we've seen a lot of edible products are coming to the market. Where you think the edible product is basically the same extract is being added to those edible products. Those edible products, you are diluting it, basically. So if you don't detect it, you're gonna be make your edible, you put in the final packaging, you send it to the lab, and the lab is going to find that pesticide. And guess what? You have to reject that whole batch of the lot of the edibles, and then again you're going to lose millions of dollars. So this is again the only solution right now is the dilution and method of spiking, post-spiking it. And with that said, ultimately, again, it is very important. We want to talk about we have been talking about the efficacy, how this product could help various patients. We talk about a lot of different ailments, but it is very important, this product, to be safe before administration. Thank you.
We have some questions.
Good morning. This was very informative. Dr. Casey position for Miracle Leaf. My question is, well, I may have a couple, but when you were talking about when it goes through the initial ion detector, I think the first part, you said the particles that compete, is it because of the complexity of the molecules or the size of them?
It's the volatility of the molecules, actually, how volatile they are. So if you go
Which
back,
is based on like carbon or hydrogen, or I spent a long time since I did organic chemistry, so is that's usually based on the size of the molecule,
basis
correct?
of the size of molecule and how volatile they are, and how fast they could get into the vapor position, so it could go into the quad 1, quad 2, and quad 3.
So the cannabis, when it's diluted, it gets
So you have,
it makes the pesticides larger, so they go through more.
yeah, and you have less competition, basically. So when you dilute it 500 times, you have 500 times less competition for that pesticide compound and the cannabinoid to get into that vapor position. So
Okay.
you're talking about a lot less molecules of the cannabinoids, basically, to compete with the pesticide.
So the method that you developed, is that proprietary to your lab, or do all the labs in the state use that?
I'll be honest with you. I believe in this product. I believe in the industry. That's one of the reasons I came to this industry, to use my last 35 years of experience, and be able to contribute. That's why I'm going and doing on the talk 2 weeks ago. I'm talking, and I've done this presentation 3 times so far. But I want to bring it to everybody's attention. I'm putting it out there. All the labs that could use it, and they're welcome to call me. And I could, because we want the program to succeed.
Very excellent presentation, Dr. Behzadi. I have a question, and this goes back to biochemistry. So the pesticides, are they categorically lipophilic, like the cannabinoids as well, or is there an overgeneralization?
One of the things when you mentioned that a lot of the medical marijuana is being cultivated inside, and you're talking to MMTCs, oh, we don't use any pesticide, and we are indoor, so we shouldn't see any pesticide. I gotta tell you, I've done a couple of cases of remediation last year, and they find this pesticide, even though they're not using any pesticide indoor, or they have no pesticide product, they did find it. So we went investigating one of these MMTC, and they were changing the air conditioning filter. I told them, give me that, actually. And we took it to the lab, which were about a 10 by 10 piece. We extract that. Guess what? We find pesticide. I've gone to other MMTCs. I find pesticide. We do a wipe test on the light fixtures, on all the surfaces. We find pesticide. And the reason for it is, you might not, you're in Florida, and a lot of these MMTCs, they are in the farm areas. So you might not be spraying your crop with a pesticide, but your neighbor down the road has an apple orchard or different things. They are spraying it. And with all the winds and everything we have in Florida, this is going to travel. And this is the fact. Even though you don't use any pesticide, or you're indoor, it's still going to get that pesticide coming through the filters. So the suggestion is routinely test your filter, change your filters, make sure that your pesticide is not breaking through.
I guess my question is there an opportunity here to have a process of treatment prior to testing other than just diluting the specimen?
Right now, no, we don't. The only way we could do it right now is, as I mentioned, the methodology. So that's what we need more R&D.
Okay.
Yeah, we need more R&D. Again, it's a young industry. Everybody is trying to, run, get the instrumentation and all that. And we need to bring out these problems so eventually other people start picking up and coming up with the solutions.
Yeah, because I'm blown away with LCMS, that, you found what you found. That was actually mind-blowing for me, because this is like, you know, ultimate standard for us as we look at that. So I'm just trying to wrap my mind around biochemically why it is that we had to do that. And
Well, you know, you have to have the pesticide. The reason, oh,
Got 1 minute.
oh yeah, the reason, and as I said in the beginning, the reason I'm standing here because we failed, basically. And the reason we failed is that specific MMTC had spiked their oil with amount of pesticide we couldn't find out, you know. So we had to go through all these things to find out. And I gotta tell you though, they gave us a second chance and we aced it. So,
well,
and
listen,
so and so it's working. This is
Yeah.
working, you know. And I wish I could, you know, even talking to the State Office of Medical Marijuana, they're having their own lab. They're starting it in Jacksonville, and you know, we share the program with them. So they are going to be taking samples. They're going to be analyzing it. So it is going to be actually be tested.
well, I can relate to your, you know, getting a PhD failing more than succeeding, so I can relate to that and empathize with you. I have a follow-up question, though, and as not just as a scientist and physician, but I have physicians in the room here too. We have this challenge with our patients, right? They're getting their products elsewhere. We're looking up, you know, their QR codes on the products if they've got them, about their safety and testing, right? So how do we trust that if
You know,
we're hearing stuff like this?
You know, you saw my, you saw my, with any kind of the vape product, you mentioned the QR code, you get a certificate of analysis. On that certificate analysis, I would really question if you have a vape product and you run it out, you know, and they, on the COA, they put a dilution level. If you have a 1x dilution, I would question that. You know, I won't say necessarily it has a pesticide, but I question it, that you cannot be conclusive that sample, well, you know, actually had no pesticide. You had at least have to dilute that 10 times. You saw the flat line at 1x. So. I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a standard, if anyone is here in the room who has done, you know, looked at that, because I can't pull up a COA in my mind to see what the dilution is, but do you know what typically the dilution is for the COAs that we are pulling up?
That dilution should be on the certificate analysis.
I know, I just was thinking that maybe there was a standard, but maybe the message I'm hearing is not a standard, but at least the powerful message I hear is, at least if it's not properly diluted, now at least I can look and see that and question it, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Harry's going to be here for the next week, so if you have any questions, he has a room here, and you can just talk to him about any questions. That was way above my pay grade. But again, not an easy business, but an important business from a physician standpoint, from a MMTC standpoint, something that Harry found and normally what happens is you make a mistake and you find it. It happens, and it's better for everybody. So with that, we go to our next product you need to succeed in business, and that's Catherine Zito, who is the CEO of Cannabis Business Solutions and host of Cannabis Entrepreneurs and Investment Meetup. She has been around the industry from the very beginning, and the solutions that she comes up with, as you can see in here, from marketing solutions and credit card solutions, she is an expert in the field and has been to many, many conferences and educated many, many people on how to handle their practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And thank you, everyone, for being here. It is my honor and pleasure to be with you this morning. So we're going to get right into a couple of things. And I started this organization 6 years ago. It's called Cannabis Entrepreneurs and Investors. It's a meetup group. And we started with 2 people. Now we have 3,250 members. And this is a perfect example of how to grow your business. So what I'm going to do is give you my secret on how did I do this and how can you do this, and we're going to do it in like 10 seconds. So on the count of 3, I want you to turn around, I want you to introduce yourself to someone you do not know, and you will say the following. Hi, tell them your name, Catherine Zito. I'm in marketing and payment processing. 1, 2, 3.
I always talk to the walls.
Yeah, oh.
And that's how it's done, folks. You just learned how to grow your business. What I'd like to do is share with you that this is a free networking group, and we are all about diversity, education, and networking. And it's also, your contact information is in your program. It's the 5th page from the back, and you can just simply log on with your email and join our group. I have done over 85 events, and we're going strong. We are now national, so things are pretty exciting. We'd love to have you join us. I'm going to start off today breaking this up into sections. It's about it's our consumer trends for this year. When we look at medical and adult use, believe it or not, we are reaching $100 billion injecting it into the economy this year, just alone with medical and adult use. This is combined through agriculture, manufacturing, and retail sales. Now, we're up 20% from last year. Our projections will be going to 2026 in just a few years to $155 billion into our economy. These are very, very strong and exciting numbers. So if you ever wondered, are you in the right place at the right time? The answer is yes. One of the big markets that is increasing and very exciting is the cannabis beverage market. So you want to keep an eye on that if you are selling any products to bring in perhaps a beverage. When we look at the revenue sales for CBD, Delta 8, and Delta 10, we see that the CBD revenue for this year is at $7.8 billion. It's going to be growing in 3 years, another $1 billion. You don't see this anywhere in the world. This is the fastest growing multi-million, billion-dollar industry in the world right now. When you look at your target market, if you are selling any type of CBD or the Delta family, you can easily see that your target market, the age group, is anywhere from 22 to 64 plus years of age. That means everyone is your customer, everyone is your patient. These are your consumers. My prediction for the future for our furry friends is we will be at about 50-50 in the future. If you are selling products right now, please consider adding a pet product. Okay, something in a full spectrum for our little furry friends. The sales market will be at in 2028, $4.79 billion. When I look at all the analytics, I can see the future is going to be 50-50, 50 about humans and then our pets. So please keep that in mind if you are in retail of any kind. We're now going to move over into brand awareness. And this is all about you, what you are doing today, how you are paving the road forward. This is a strategy for brand awareness, is one of your most powerful marketing tools. Now, if you decide you're building your business right now to eventually sell, then this is super important for you. You have to do a couple things, folks. It's not going to happen on its own. When I like to lead out with programs, it's about your 5-star services. Tell us what you do. Tell us the difference between you and anybody else. Share about your services. If you are currently only branding yourself as a physician or perhaps an educator of some kind in the business, be careful. It's not just about you, and especially if you change where you want to go in the future or what you want to do. Maybe you want to expand into a different position. You want your business to continue, so not only are you branding your name, your professionalism, your experience, you must totally brand your whole entire team, okay, and your services and your message. Customer and patient reviews. I don't know why we are so afraid to ask for those darn reviews, but I can tell you this. If they are in your clinic or in your business or even e-commerce, you are in full right to ask them how their experience was. And most of the time, they will give you something good. And if not, then we learn from those other reviews and we become better, right? Referral programs, give to receive. So many times we receive things in the mail that say happy birthday or happy new year or Merry Christmas or whatever it might be. But what we do is we just don't say anything else. We don't put an offer out there. If you want a patient to refer another patient to you, give them a little something. Give them a sample of something for free, something that doesn't cost you. Talk to your reps about that. Put in place a program that gives back first. That is going to be, it's going to drive business in a natural way because we have to believe in ourselves, we have to ask, we have to give, and I promise you, you will receive. We're going to be talking about in-depth content marketing and SEO. That stands for Search Engine Optimization. And today I'm going to give you the answers to the test. When you leave here today, you will be able to use just a few words to promote whatever business you're in. Blog for Google ranking. Now, blogging. Every person I talk to hates the idea of blogging. They are not professional writers, and they generally don't have the time because you need to be blogging at least once a month, 12 times per year. This is a very inexpensive thing to contract out, but it's imperative that you do for your Google rankings to stay relevant and fresh. Your social media presence, that's another one. Just hire it out. This is so inexpensive and it will give you so much traction, and we always are looking at driving traffic, the right person, the right patient to your business. Video. Now you get into a little bit more, but write a really simple script. It doesn't need to be over a minute. So somebody can do this for you. But when patients and people who are shopping to purchase products, they will definitely go 93% of the time, they will look at videos to compare before they make their final buying decision. So we're talking services, products, and people. We're going to go now into SEO, hashtags, and Google. This is all going to be about which words should you use for your marketing and in your business. The keywords at SEO, you need to use them in your website, in your print, in your social media, and even in your emails. Every time you communicate, you've got to get down to what you do in just a few words that the consumer is looking for. And that's where it changes. It's not about what you think, it's about what they want, and then fulfilling that service or that product. Google AdWords. At this time and for several years now, we have not been able to, like traditional businesses, purchase Google AdWords. We cannot buy anything that says marijuana. Doesn't matter whether you're a physician, or it doesn't even matter if you're in research or that you're a supporting ancillary product or service. It doesn't matter. It's no. So how we have to get there on Google first page and stay there is by using relevant content that people are looking for. And in fact, shoppers today would prefer to work with a business that got there on their own merit, as opposed to buying their way there. So a lot of times you'll see yourself even skipping through the ads and getting right down to people that have something really relevant to say that will match your needs. We've got to blog often, and if you can do it once a month, that would be tremendous, but if you can do it every 2 weeks, that would be even better. It needs to be a part of your program. It needs to be a part of your business. Okay? After you have your business plan, you've got to roll it out. How are we going to bring people into our business or our clinic? It's through internet and communication. This looks like an ominous list here because you see all these numbers. But when I tell you this for keywords, and we're going to start with medical cannabis, the bigger number does not always mean it's the best. What we want to do is we want to be specific, and we want to use long tail keywords. So for instance, I've pointed out here that there are 239 million searches per month for just the words medical cannabis. 2 words. That is not for you. That is too vague, and it means too many things. So what you want to do is we want to go to something a little bit more specific. So as we look, we say medical cannabis for sleep. And it's really quite fascinating. These have significantly changed over the last 12 to 24 months. This is what's trending. This is what's fresh. We have, what you want to put is whenever you're writing, even in your website or in your print materials, you want to be more specific. So you want to say, what is your specialty? Medical cannabis for sleep, for depression, for anxiety, for chronic pain, for arthritis, for stress relief. And these are in the order that you see them is what people want today. All right, doesn't mean though, if your specialty is chronic pain, believe me, they all tie together, okay? Because a lot of times if you are working with chronic pain, you are going to have to address some of these other medical conditions which people are looking for. We used to say inflammation, or how to reduce inflammation, or anti-inflammation. Do you know that we have become so mature now that we actually don't say that anymore? We say arthritis, okay? So, again, being specific. Medical cannabis for seizures and epilepsy. We used to say epilepsy, but now we see almost double the numbers people are typing in for seizures. Very specific. That means what it's telling us is that the consumer and your patient and your customers, they're savvy. They know what they want. A lot of education in this industry, which has propelled us to success. We're now going to go into, if you are a referring physician, what are the key words that you should be using specific to your business? Medical marijuana doctor near me. You can actually, in your SEO, in your website, put near me. We were never allowed to do that before, and now it's completely acceptable. And as you can see, 120 million people across the U.S. are looking for this. I'm going to move down to medical marijuana treatment. So you can also use clinics. Those are interchangeable words. 6.7 million. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is be more specific. So you want to say medical marijuana treatment clinic in Florida or in your city. The numbers will significantly drop, but don't get discouraged. What you're doing is you are tailoring your message for that very specific target market. When we look at medical marijuana doctor, and I'm going to show you an example of what happens next, we have 4.7 million people looking for that in just Orlando every single month. It's pretty astonishing numbers. California, 29 million. But you have to look and see how many residents in each. It all makes sense. And we are very, very strong in Florida, as you can see the numbers at the bottom. This is what it looks like. So if you're doing your homework right, and you used your proper words. Now, I simply put in there medical marijuana doctor Orlando. And up in the organic section comes those particular places with a map. And then your contact information, and making sure that your contact information is always up to date. Keep refreshing. Google loves fresh and activity. Okay? We're going to look at keywords now for the recreation, adult use industry, medical, and CBD. So we have dispensary near me. 761 million people a month are looking for you if you are a dispensary. We also say cannabis store, okay? Not just dispensary anymore, which is fantastic. As you can see, it's leveling out in mainstream America when we start to change the words and we make them more comfortable for us to say and use, like the word marijuana. Everyone's becoming more comfortable now by saying cannabis. Well, that elevates us. That makes us more mature. So when you are talking, use the word cannabis and not marijuana. Another very popular word, we used to say the word shop. And once in a while, you can still use that. It's okay to be interchangeable. But the most popular word, if you are selling something, is the word buy. B-U-Y, 3 little letters before your whatever you're doing, and you will drive the right traffic with people who are ready to buy, to make a purchase. We have the words recreation. Recreational is now interchangeable. That never used to be a thing, okay? Even though we're not a rec state yet, it's really important to know what the country is doing, not just in your own little space. Also to say cannabis for sale. Those also can be used, but buy, again, is a stronger word. So you'll see 60 million people are looking for medical marijuana for sale. That is extremely strong. Okay. The other part of the industry is called Ancillary. This is all the people like myself who support the industry. We don't work with patients, we don't touch the plant, but we are in the industry every single day like you are. So for instance, let's say you're looking for a lawyer. They won't find the right lawyer if they just type in Lawyer Orlando, for instance, because we're very specific. It has to be hire a cannabis lawyer. Now look at these numbers, over 43 million people looking for a cannabis lawyer now? Oh my gosh, this is fantastic, especially for the lawyers, right? We can say marijuana, but you see the numbers really drop significantly here. Using the word cannabis is going to get you where you need to be. Bongs for sale, really super popular because this is an ancillary, it's equipment. For instance, 313 million people searching a month. If you're an accountant or you're doing any type of tax services, you want to specifically put tax accountant for a marijuana or cannabis business. Those are called long-tail keywords, and they will bring more traffic to you versus using 1 or 2 words. We're going to switch over quickly to products and which words are going to be best for you to promote your products. The list is long, but it's fun. CBD. If you put buy CBD, there are 206 million people looking to buy your product. So be sure to put that in all of your marketing and your advertising. CBD for sale, 129 million. And then as we go down, I want to talk about topicals. Topicals is one of the most progressive and growing areas in our industry. Cream happens to be #1 right now. But if you are selling, let's just say, an array of skincare, this next year most likely will be #1. It's growing, it's got traction. People are getting used to saying words like skincare versus just the word cream. Then we go down to gel being the 3rd most popular, and balm. Now, if you are selling a balm, don't feel like you're not making it right or you're not hitting the right numbers because cream is higher. Tell folks what you are looking for or what you have, because I promise you, even though the numbers are smaller, they're going to be a little bit more qualified for what you are to make the perfect match. This list is so fascinating. Sports drinks, CBD sports drinks and beverages is now number 1. A few years ago when I spoke, this was last on the list. You have to look and see what people want. And here we go. It can't just be, if you're not doing sports, it can't just be beverages. Then vapes, CBD vape, edibles, gummies, capsules, and then pet treats. I have to tell you, I'm an analyst, and part of this is so fascinating to me because it changes every single year. But you are in the right space if you have any one of these products to sell. Delta, the Delta, I'll tell you, look at this number here, Delta 10, really? What the heck is that thing? I haven't tried it yet. It is getting 2.1 billion searches a month. What does that tell you? It tells you people want new, they want different, they want to try everything new. So even if you're not selling Delta 10 right now, just look at these numbers. What are people wanting? Then we look at edibles. And so we have Delta 8 edibles. This is a good example of numbers. The big numbers are not always best. So we have 26 versus 4 million searches. Go with the 4 million. The more specific that you are, the better. Gummies, shop Delta 8 gummies is very popular, and buy Delta 8 vape. Now for something more exciting than all that, payment processing. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes touching on this so that you can understand what the trends are and what you can get for your business, and you can change. You can also use multiple different ways of processing. You don't just have to use one. For referring physicians, CBD sales, and Delta 8 and 10, and as of yesterday, we now can do Delta 9. I was just notified on that, so it's really exciting. So if you're selling any of those, you can get processing with MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and American Express. And those rates are going to be 3% plus 15 cents per transaction. These are extremely low numbers. 2 years ago, it was at 5%. Some other places in the country are charging 7% and more. So we're with Authorize.net, which is one of the largest in the world. So that's why. That's how we get the lower numbers. What I want to share with you is you can also do the e-commerce. The numbers are a little higher, and that's because it's higher risk in your e-commerce. The only difference here is if you are selling online, there's an extra compliancy fee that they are charging right now, which is $100 a month. That may seem a little high right now, that may not feel good, but it will be good for our industry because this is a gray area. And the processor, underwriters, and banks, they don't want to take these big risks. So they just want to make sure that somebody every once in a while is going to look at your website, make sure you're selling what you say you're selling and what you've been approved for. There's just some business behind the scenes, some other little numbers, but we give away a free terminal with a printer that's preloaded, so all it does is come to your office, you plug it in, you just connect to Wi-Fi, and you're in business. All of your banking now is preloaded, where before this used to be a little bit of a cumbersome task. As far as vape goes, specifically, online, we cannot sell independent vapes. It has to be a disposable. That's just what it is for today. Next year, it might be something different. So the disposable has to have a cartridge and the battery connected. If you're in medical cannabis and adult use, those two are together. We can only right now provide debit cards, but it's a super convenient thing. So if you have a dispensary and you still want to keep your ATM for folks that just want to, do cash, or you're doing an app, but if people don't want to do any of that, they don't want to go to the ATM, and they don't want to download or have to give any information of their banking information, then they can use their debit cards. Very convenient in the office or in the dispensary or store. These are a little higher, 3.95% plus 35 cents per transaction. That's still very, very low compared to some other processors in the country. This is what's the most fascinating part about this. Is brand new. We're now doing these cellular terminals. Before, if you had a dispensary, you were not allowed to sell any product or make any transactions if you stepped 1 foot out of your brick and mortar dispensary. But now they're allowing you to take this to festivals and conferences and any place that's mobile. Do you know we have a client right now that infuses CBD in Texas, of all places? I didn't even know that they would allow something like this. They do over $1 million a year infusing coffee, and they just have these mobile trucks in the woods somewhere. I mean, it's $1 million in coffee. Okay, so they are with us, and they have everything they do is mobile. That might be an application that you might want to think about. And then there's always free training and support. You want to be able to, whoever you decide to go with, you want to be able to pick up that phone and talk to someone. We negotiate for you. And then in 6 months, if you're doing some good business, then we go back to the processor and we negotiate for lower rates. We have your back. You have to find someone you trust. That's the most important thing. Here are some required documents, just a social security number for all your partners, driver's license, EIN, your articles of incorporation. Here's something that is brand new. If you are a startup, processors don't like startups, I'm sorry to say, because there's such high risk, and it takes sometimes years before they start generating some good revenue. So, but here's the one great thing. If you don't have any transactions at all, and you have no history, what we can do is if you've ever had another business, they will allow you to bring in transactions, even if it was through PayPal, or if it was even cash transactions, if it's in a bank. So if you used to be a baker, they will use those transactions. If you used to use a landscaping company, they will use that. You see, they want to know, do you know how to run a business? Okay? So I'm so pleased to see this for startups now. We have just a few minutes for questions. If you have anything about marketing, SEO, hashtags, payment processing, I would be happy to answer those for you right now. Yes, ma'am. Got a microphone coming to you right away.
Hi, I just had a question on the keywords.
Yes.
When it comes to Google Analytics, and they're still pretty conservative when it comes to our industry, I've noticed that there are certain companies or even marketing companies, when they use those words, they can actually be blacklisted and taken off.
Oh, you mean Facebook?
Not only Facebook, but also Google. Google
Yeah.
does it as well. So what
But
do
not
you
in
see
blogging.
does work?
Yeah, not in blogging.
Not in
You know,
blogging, okay.
that's you own that. Okay, that's your story. That's your article. That's education information. So they will not block you for that. Now, of course, we can't buy any words, but if you start using these delicate words, I'm going to call them, on Facebook, they will definitely block you. I have been myself shut down and started over again and things of that nature, because it's very hard to then keep your audience from these social media platforms. We don't have their contact information. So yes, I agree with you. In certain applications, you might have a problem, but in most applications today, if it's coming through blogging or on your website, you are free and clear to use those words.
Perfect. Thank you so much for clarification.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Again, Catherine is bunking in with Harry, so she'll be here for next week to talk to also. Now, to wrap this up, after you've done this, you've got your financing, your product is clean, you got your marketing aspect, guess who comes knocking at your door? You got it.
That's right.
The IRS. Your friends, the friendly faces of the IRS, will come and visit you sometime. So with that, we have a person who is in the accounting field of Greenleaf Accounting. Peggy Kohler, who's the owner of the company, has a great story to tell you and to give you some words of wisdom when dealing with your accounting and filing for your business. Peggy? You see, you're so well trained. It only took you 4 people to clap before they come on. Very well trained.
It was all for me, so that's
All
great.
for you.
Okay, so I'm also, not only am I an accountant, I'm also a fraud examiner, and I'm a forensic accountant. So I deal a lot with fraud, and I know what the IRS is looking for. So you've been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride this morning. You had David come up and tell you, great, you can get financing, right? Then we had a little bit of a lull because Harry's saying, oh, well, maybe the product isn't very safe. And then we got Catherine coming up here and saying, but it's okay because we can market that product and everything's gonna be great. And now you've got me at the end of the roller coaster saying, guess what? 93% of you in this room are gonna be audited. 89% of you that are audited are gonna be convicted of tax fraud and possibly go to prison. But I'm here to tell you how not to do that. So what we're gonna look at today are the risk factors, red flags, and how the IRS actually investigates. I'm not gonna get into investigation very much, but we're gonna look at those other things. So first of all, we're gonna look at the tax fraud investigation process, and most of you know that as audit. There are 6 steps to the investigation process, but we're only gonna look at the first 3 today, because we don't have enough time. I could go on for hours. Okay, before we get started, I wanna tell you a little bit about the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax avoidance is 100% legal. It is not fraud. That is what a good accountant is going to do for you. They're going to use legal methods to minimize your taxes. What we don't want to do is tax evasion, and that's tax fraud. That's when they come looking for you and they will put you in jail. They win. Right now the IRS tax court has won every single case that has been brought before them. You will not win. In order to prosecute fraud, there are 4 legal requirements. The first one is there must be an intentional wrongdoing. It must be intentional. You can't make mistakes. People make mistakes, the IRS understands that, and they'll do what's called remediation, which means they take some extra money from you, and then they penalize you, and they make it hurt a little bit so you don't do it again. Okay, and then they teach you how to do it correctly. There also has to be the specific purpose of evading a tax. It's the tax court. They don't care if you're trying to do other types of fraud. The third thing that there must be is the taxpayer must actually owe a tax. So at the end of the finding, if the IRS goes, oh, well, we owe you a refund, they can't prosecute you for tax fraud. And the last one is there has to be at least of what they call an affirmative act, and that's what demonstrates the intent. Did you lie? Did you conceal things? Did you destroy your records? There are specific things they look at that is what drives that intent. And they must have all 4 of those. So step 1 of the process is to evaluate risk factors. So what are risk factors? Risk factors are known circumstances that increase the risk of fraud happening in an organization. And these help examiners like me to identify which fraud schemes might be occurring and to identify the red flags associated with those specific fraud schemes. And this helps us to focus on collecting only the relevant evidence. We could see evidence that all kinds of things are happening, and sometimes it gets a little distracting. So if we know which risk factors are present, then we can tailor our investigations to look at only those specific things. There are 3 categories of risk factors. The first one is motivational risk factors. And this deals with the motivation of the management of the company, the CEO, whoever's in charge of the company, what is their motivation for their company. The second one is a situational risk factor. This has to do more with the business environment and the operations. What kind of internal controls are in place? What is actually happening in the company? The third one is behavioral risk factors. And this has 100% to do with company culture. What is acceptable in your organization? So what are the tax fraud risks that are present in the cannabis space? I've identified a few, and I'm going to go over some of these with you. The first one is that cannabis CEOs like David mentioned, are sometimes focused on that short-term result. They're in it for the exit, the big money at the end. This is a motivational risk factor. So when we see that, we know that maybe they're willing to overlook a few things to get that big exit. This increases the risk of tax fraud because CEOs in this situation might circumvent the 280E tax code to increase net income. I will tell you that if you are subject to 280E tax, the IRS takes about 80% of your profits. So if we look back at the number that Catherine gave us, it's $1 billion or $100 billion. The IRS made $80 billion. They like 280E. They do not want legalization. If they do, they're going to replace it with something else. An excise tax, it probably won't be as big, but they love us. They hate us and they love us. CEOs might also manipulate financials to artificially inflate the value of the business. When they get ready for the M&A, the first thing that's going to happen is when they go to their M&A attorney, we're ready, we have a letter of intent, we have a letter of intent. Now what? Now the buyer opens up the books and they go, we ran some ratios and there's some things that look really weird. So we don't want to do that. The second risk factor that I've identified is that cannabis companies are usually cash-intensive businesses. This is a situational risk factor. Sometimes these things are things that we can't really control. This increases the risk of tax fraud because cash could be removed before it hits the books. Oh, thank you. I will put that right here. IRS doesn't like that because that money you just took in is income, and they want their 80% of that. So they don't want you putting that in your pocket. The second thing is payroll taxes could be evaded by paying employees under the table. They don't like that either. And the reason this can occur is cash is untraceable. If there's no document of where it came from or where it went, no one can prove that it didn't exist, but we have ways of looking to see that the income was underreported. Third risk factor, cannabis companies have exposure to the underground economy, and that's what the IRS thinks. The IRS thinks we're all selling it illegally. They want to make sure that every bit you sell is taxed. They get their money. They don't care if it's legal or not. They're getting their money. This increases the risk of tax fraud because, like I said, the IRS thinks that we are making illegal cash sales of a legitimately purchased product or diversion, and we're not reporting the income, or that possibly inversion is occurring and we're still not reporting that income. Fourth one is that cannabis companies usually engage non-industry bookkeepers or accountants. This is also situational. Most of the time, again, not your fault. You can't find an accountant or a bookkeeper that is cannabis specific, that they know the ins and outs, they know how to handle 280E and 47111. If you don't know what those numbers are, you really need to find somebody who can explain that to you because you're ultimately responsible for your tax return. Doesn't matter who your CPA is, doesn't matter who you used, you're the one who signed it, you're the taxpayer, you're the one the IRS is coming after. This situation increases the risk of tax fraud because accounting and taxes will most likely be done improperly. Now, what we were talking about before is intent, okay? So if it's an unknowledgeable person and they're doing it unknowingly, that may not qualify as tax fraud, but it will result in penalties, fees, additional tax, that remediation I was talking about. They're going to counsel you, and not only that, they're going to watch you. They're going to audit you for the next 5 to 7 years to make sure that you're still complying with the tax code. And it could also result in tax fraud if the IRS can prove intent. Now, one of the things about intent that it may look intentional, we look, as fraud examiners, we look for patterns. And one of the things that we look at is how many times something happened. If you've been in business for a few years, you've had a few years of tax returns. If you've done them exactly the same every year, the first time you do something wrong, it's an error. The second time you do something wrong, maybe you just don't know any better. Ignorance. You know, we're ignorant of a certain situation. The third time you do it, that's a pattern, and you're doing it on purpose. Doesn't matter if you really are or not, that's what fraud examiners see. The next one is that cannabis companies might have inadequate or poor internal controls. Now this is important because these increase the risk of tax fraud because it provides the opportunity to commit all of these tax frauds that we already talked about, plus asset theft. People could walk off with your money. It could be your employees, it could be somebody who knows where you store the cash because you didn't take it to deposit that night. Could be anything. Could be inventory. They could walk off with product. Fraudulent purchase and disbursement schemes where people are paying money to themselves as a vendor, things like that happen. Another thing that David was talking about was having poor controls. If you have really good controls, the IRS is not going to look as hard at you because they know you're doing your job the best of your ability and you're really trying to comply. The sixth one that I identified is a behavioral tax risk factor, and that is that cannabis companies have a company culture that embraces high tolerance of risk. We have to. We are in a risky business, risky environment. This increases the risk of all fraud because taking risks are acceptable in our space. Most other companies taking those kinds of risks are not acceptable. We look at, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. We don't say that word. We say, yes, we can. They told us that we can't, but we're going to find a way around it. Okay, and that's wonderful. That is a great entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial characteristic. But when you're talking about the IRS, they don't want to know that you are willing to go around their rules. Okay, so step 2 is now that we've identified all of these risk factors, what are the red flags or affirmative indicators that the IRS is going to look for to see if these fraud schemes are happening? So I'm saying it's step 2, but it happens throughout the investigative process. Some of it may be observed before the investigation and some of it afterwards. The IRS does it backwards. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So as a fraud examiner, if you all have a company and you're thinking something's going wrong, you're seeing those red flags. You're saying, look, something doesn't look right, and you're going to call a fraud examiner to say, hey, I think some fraud might be happening. Come help me look for this. And I'm going to go in, and now I'm going to go look for these affirmative indicators, these things that I think are happening. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assess the risk of your company. Are you really at risk of fraud? If you're highly at risk of fraud, I know which kinds of things to start looking for. The IRS, they already know that we're cash intensive, we're selling things illegally, we're trafficking drugs, we're selling it to the black market. They are already convinced that we're doing all of these things. I don't want to use the word targeting because, it's a legal term. But they know it, and they're coming after us. So they already know we're risk intensive. So they are choosing the riskiest companies that they can find. They already know that first. Then they start looking for red flags to prove it. So there are 5 major categories of tax fraud related red flags. The first one are analytical anomalies. These are transactions or financial statement relationships that don't make any sense. For example, round or even transaction numbers. If you have product that ends in 99 cents, you're not going to have a lot of transactions that are an even $100.00. And we look for that. There's also going to be patterns of numbers, things that we talked about before, like patterns. 1 time's a mistake, 1 time's an error, it's an anomaly. 2 times, okay, maybe. If you see that exact same number 3 times, we know that there's a pattern there. Something might be going a little weird. Unexplained large or small amounts. Strange relationships between accounts. These are ratios. These are things, financial ratios, that also investors use to check the health of a company. If they see ratios out of whack, we see ratios out of whack, there's something going on. Accounting anomalies, unusual activities that seem to violate the normal expectations for the accounting system. And by that I mean missing documents, duplicate payments, breaks in check sequence, documents that appear to be altered. That's great. We have Xerox machines. We have copy machines. We can copy, white out, rewrite numbers. I've never seen that. Internal control irregularities or weaknesses. This is very, very important. These are controls that are necessary to safeguard your assets and main integrity of the financial reporting system. We've talked about a little bit about those. Examples of weaknesses are a lack of segregation of duties. The same person who writes the check, signs the check, and mails it. Big no-no. Okay, things like that. Same person that takes in the cash is the one who deposits it in the bank. Maybe it'll all make it, maybe it won't. Lack of physical safeguards. If you have a lot of cash, do you have somebody to guard that cash? Do you have a safe to put it in? Does it sit in a Walmart bag under the desk? Okay, we have inadequate accounting system. What do you use? Is it cannabis specific? Do you have a cannabis specific chart of accounts? Does it even make any sense for your business? And then also inadequate whistleblower opportunities and protection. Those are for bigger companies because most fraud does come to us through tips. Lifestyle symptoms. These are great. Material possessions that suggest living outside of legal means, like a big old Hummer that's all wrapped and everything. So example, luxury cars, expensive homes, expensive boats, designer jewelry and clothing. If the IRS knows how much money you made. They're looking at your tax return. And if it says you made this, but your living expenses look like you made this, they know there's something wrong. And you're going to usually have, the taxpayer is usually going to have a quick excuse for it. I inherited that, my spouse got a promotion, whatever, there'll be a fast response to that, and that's also an indicator. The fifth one is unusual behaviors. These are behaviors that are caused by the stress of concealing the fraud. Examples are insomnia, paranoia, alcohol abuse, irritability, and inability to look people in the eye. Now, we all know that none of those necessarily mean fraud, that there are people that have all of those things going on in their life. A lot of them come to you guys for those things. So just because these are red flags doesn't mean that fraud is actually happening. We have to investigate that. So step 3 is to determine if predication exists. So what is predication? Predication is a legal term. There's a really, really long legal description, but basically predication is the suspicion that something is happening and then corroborating evidence. In order to prosecute fraud, a predication must exist before an examination can take place. We can't even go forward with the examination without predication. So how can the IRS come in and audit you and investigate if they don't have any proof yet that you're actually committing tax fraud? They do what's called a pre-contact analysis of the tax return. We're going to go really quick through this. An examiner will pull 4 to 6 years of your tax returns, and they're going to perform different analyses based on your tax return. If you file a Schedule C or F, they're going to do what's called a cash T account, which I'll show you a quick example of. Otherwise, they're going to pull percentage analysis, vertical and horizontal, financial ratio analysis. They're going to analyze your tax returns to see if there's missing income. The cash T analysis, this is kind of what it looks like. And basically it looks for sources and uses of cash, ins and outs. It's not like a recalculation of your taxes or anything, but it gives us an estimation that's available to pay living expenses. We have items on the side. We have the tax source where they came from on the tax return. And on the right-hand column, we're going to show sources of income, what came in, and what went out. When we get down at the bottom, we're gonna total all the ins, all the outs, and we're gonna come out with what you have available left for the year to pay your living expenses. This example came up with $5,517. Nobody can live off of $5,517 for a whole year. So that tells the examiner there's some missing income that has not been reported on that tax return. That's enough right there for predication. Percentage analysis. If you don't file a C or an F, if you're a corporation or a partnership filing an 1120 or 1065, they're going to do a vertical or common size analysis, which converts all the amounts on the financial statement to a percentage of one of the line items. For example, for the income statement, all items are shown as a percentage of net sales. On the horizontal or trend analysis, this is going to calculate both dollar and percentage change from year to year. This is an example, a very, very basic example of what a vertical and a horizontal analysis looks like. For example, on the second line, we have cost of goods sold for $125,000 for the first year. That's 50% of net sales. That's that vertical analysis, and we'll look at that from year to year. Horizontal analysis tells us the change of those cost of goods. It went up 140% from the first year to the second year. To note, though, net sales only went up 80%. So if the cost of your product is going up, cost of your goods to sell the product is going up by 140%, but your net sales are only going up by 80, that may or may not be an indication that you're not reporting all of that income. We don't know, though, because a trend can't be identified with less than 3 years, because you can't tell if it's going up or down, really. It's just kind of like spikes. Maybe it'll go back to normal. 5 years is preferred, so for this, we need a minimum of 3 years of tax returns for a vertical and 4 for a horizontal analysis. Real quick, financial ratio analysis. These are ratios that are calculated and compared to other years in your company. We're also going to compare them to other companies in the industry using NAICS codes. NAICS is the North American Industry Classification System. Industry averages, we're going to look at the cannabis industry as a whole. We're also going to look at the entire economy. Everybody went down from COVID, okay? So if you went up during COVID and everybody else went down, there might be something going on. It usually happens the other way around, though. Currently, there are no NAICS codes for cannabis, and so there's not really a way to compare you from company to company within the industry or to the industry as a whole. So the IRS is going to use the NAICS code that you report on your tax return. So if you're reporting your NAICS code as manufacturing, I think one of them is botanicals growing is one of them that some people use. So they're going to compare you to everybody else in the botanicals industry. So you don't even really compare to them because we're not doing the same thing. But the IRS is going to compare you to whatever you report on your tax return. These are 10 common fraud ratios that can be computed from information found on tax returns alone. The two that are in yellow, the gross profit margin ratio and the inventory turnover ratio, are ones that are mentioned specifically by the IRS in their cash-intensive business audit techniques guide. So those are the ones that they're going to look at. Step 4, real quick, performing the investigation. I'm not really going to go into this, but at this time, the IRS has determined that predication exists, that there's enough affirmative indicators are present, substantive corroborating evidence is present. So this is when you're going to be notified that you're under investigation and that the IRS is requesting its initial interview. So at this point, what should you do? Absolutely. Call a qualified tax attorney who understands the cannabis industry. Please, please, please make sure they understand our industry, because otherwise they won't understand 280E, they won't understand cost of goods. And then also comply with the investigator throughout the entire investigation. You can be penalized, you can be fined. Please comply with them, but consult with your attorney first, because they will advise you of when and if it is appropriate to use your Fifth Amendment rights, okay? And they will also have them come out and they will talk to your employees first and prep them for the audit, which also could invoke client attorney privilege. So, how to lower your risks of fraud in the cannabis space? First thing to do is understand how the IRS applies tax code. If you don't, consult with an accountant or tax attorney that knows cannabis. Second, assess your entity structure. Consult with a corporate attorney that knows cannabis and make sure that your structure is working for you and it makes sense and it's efficient and it's not there just to evade taxes. Clean up your current books and records and keep them clean. Make sure they are bulletproof. When the IRS comes calling, you can sit back and go, I know I'm good, okay? To do that, hire an accountant who's an expert in cannabis. Number four is strengthen your internal controls. Consult with a fraud prevention specialist who knows cannabis. Find a cannabis-friendly bank and use that for all transactions. No cash. We have cannabis-friendly banks now. We can bank. We can take that cash, even if we take in cash, we can take that and we can take it to the bank. And now there's record. Now that is legitimate income. Please strengthen your internal controls. Keep current with tax codes and IRS changes. Read. Boring stuff, but please read it. And lastly, comply with those tax codes. Okay? And if you have any additional questions, this is my contact information. And do I have any right now?
Just let me remind you that this is being recorded, so watch the questions.
Oh, yes, please. I'm not going to answer any questions that are specific to your business. If you have specific questions and not general, please call me and we can talk about them on the phone, but I'm not going to answer anything about your specific situation.
Peggy.
Yes.
Great presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
What percentage of what percentage of the industry is subject to the 280E tax code?
Okay, so anybody but growers, really. Well, not physicians either, sorry. Okay, it's complicated. So what 280E says is that any business that traffics in illegal drugs is not eligible to take deduction for ordinary and necessary business expenses. So basically you can deduct all of your cost of goods sold. So for example, let's say you're a dispensary, okay? You don't, and I know we're all vertically integrated in Florida, but let's say we're not. So you're a dispensary and you buy product from somebody else. The cost that you bought that product at is what you can deduct deduct as cost of goods sold. Along that with anything that goes with that freight, inbound freight, things like that. Everything else that's ordinary and necessary, rent, payroll expenses, any of that, utilities, that is all not deductible. So you're basically being taxed on your gross profit rather than your net income.
Are you telling us that this industry is thriving on a 20%
Yes.
of their
Yes,
gross
and
profit?
as a matter of fact, I pulled the numbers from TrueLeave. They actually have a really good section in their 10K that shows the impact of 280E on their corporation. And basically what it comes down to is for every dollar that goes into their register, their shareholders keep 2 pennies.
And this is nationally, not just in Florida.
Yep, that is a national tax code, IRS tax code.
Do you have some tax avoidance techniques to?
What's that?
Do you have some tax avoidance techniques
Well,
to get around that?
That's why the IRS is looking really hard at cannabis, because they know you guys want to get around that. We don't want to pay them 89% of what we make. So, yeah. Sorry.
Quickly, I have a question about the resale certificate for certain stores that have cannabis-related products. So you know how you have to quarterly file the taxes for the resale, and when you have to hit that merchant, that automatically passes the taxes down to the consumer. What's the difference between filing that and your annual taxes federally?
Okay, so those are sales taxes or excise taxes that are paid to the state. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So when initially, like say if you have like a CBD dispensary, you'll have to get a resale certificate. That resale certificate passes the taxes bought in your store to the consumer. So the consumer will be paying the state taxes.
Correct.
But how does that differentiate between that and the actual annual federal taxes that you would have to pay?
Okay, it's a
To the
totally
IRS.
different situation. The federal taxes that you pay every year are on your income from your business. The tax that you're collecting, that you're paying over to the state, is the state sales tax that you're just collecting on behalf of the state.
Okay. Because, as a cannabis-related company, some of the products, I'm able to pass those sales taxes down. And how do I relate that some of those taxes was passed out in my annual IRS taxes?
The only thing you can really do is take a deduction for the sales tax that you've paid out.
Okay, all right.
But you, again, need to speak with someone because there are certain circumstances where that's not allowed either.
Okay,
But, but federal income taxes are completely different.
understood.
I think, uh-oh.
Just a quick question. I work with Move, and I actually had an employee come to me last week, and this was a new one I'd never heard before. Veteran works at Move, was denied a VA home loan because of where he works. Not even the fact that he was a patient, but of where he works. Is that because the VA will look at that as tarnished money that he's earning, that they would repay the loan? 'Cause, that one offended me on levels that I hadn't heard in a while.
Absolutely. And if you're applying for home loans through any federally backed program, through FHA loans or, first-time home buyer, any of those situations, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, any of those, you are going to really be, it's going to be tough because they look at that as, like you said, it's tarnished money. They don't know where it came from. They don't want to touch it. Same thing with the banking industry. If we could just get that Safe Banking Act passed and they realize that not all the money that comes from this comes from illegal sources and banks don't want to touch it, Visa doesn't want to touch it. Oh, I guess they are okay with that now. Visa and MasterCard are okay with it. So it's evolving, it's maturing, but there's a lot of people that think that this money, it all goes back to money laundering, anti-money laundering, Patriot Act, all of that. Anything that's a suspicious source. I haven't heard it specifically, but again, I'm not saying that it can't happen. Oh yeah, it might be the servicer too. Whoever is actually servicing the loan might have those specific criteria.
May go another broker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to wrap up.
Oh, okay. I guess we're
We
done.
need to wrap up. Peggy is bunking in with the four of them. She's not going home.
I'm not writing checks.
Not right home. So we got plenty of time if you want to talk to them afterwards. And now we're on a break, an abbreviated break for about 20 minutes until next session starts at 11 o'clock. We appreciate you coming into this one, and we will see you inside. How about a round of applause for everybody that was here?
Recording stopped.